Hello, welcome back. In today's video, I will show you how I made this looping animation. As you can see, the spheres fall from the top, collect, the doors open, and they fall down the hole. Thank you, Leo. Let me just show you the original file that you saw the animation from. And here's everything in the scene. As you can see, we have a whole bunch of Ico Spheres above the container shape, and then these drop into the container, of course. And after a few seconds, the trapdoors open up, the balls fall through, and then they're poured through a funnel shape beneath that. So the key thing to this working is mainly obviously apart from the physics, is the trapdoor animations, which I can show you here how that works, how that looks. If I click here and play it, you can see we have this kind of bouncy line animation there. Let's start a new file and get started. So let's delete this poor cube and this little lamp. And I'm going to start by adding a UV sphere. And let's just change some of these values here. Or we can leave them as default actually. And that's pretty much okay. So let's switch over to wireframe, vertex mode, and just select these top vertices and delete those. And that creates a nice opening for us. So now we switch to edge mode and select this edge loop here, and then right click and select edge split. And that effectively creates a cut above and below that line. So hover your mouse over the lower faces in face mode, of course. Press the L key to select linked, and then press the P key to make that selection its own object, as you can see there in the outliner. So now we have two objects. The / key or question mark key will enter local view or isolation mode. So let's just do that and then right click to shade smooth. So we need to make this container have some thickness. Shift D to duplicate everything, and then right click to leave it in place. And then with the scale, press S for scale, Shift Z, and that will stop the scale in the Z axis. So we get a nice flat top and a nice flat bottom, as you can see there. So let's get back out of isolation mode or local mode. Do the same for the lower part now to some degree. So we'll shade that smooth by right clicking, and then we'll tab into edit mode, select these edges here. So alt click and shift alt click, and again right click edge split. Go to face mode, hover over 1/2, press L, and then delete those faces once you've got those selected. Now for this to work, obviously we need to have the hinge, if you like, in the right location. And that needs to be somewhere else. So first of all, let's make sure that our snapping is set to vertex. And then if you hold down the control key, that will invoke the snapping as you're making any translations. So for now, let's put that there. It's not going to be where the hinge is just yet. We'll do that later. But we need to scale these in. So with everything selected, press E to extrude, and then Alt S to scale along the normals. Now we need to see the other part of the container to get the right thickness. So enable that again and just Alt S again. Just roughly eyeball the width of that. So as you can see there, we need to flatten those top faces now. So what I'm going to do is select those top vertices or edges that run all the way along the top there. You could just select them actually and press GG and then slide them down inside. And again, just eyeball it from the side view. I think I use snapping again, just for accuracy's sake, but you don't have to do that. Of course, that makes it thinner at the top than it does at the bottom. So we need to then scale the edge that we just moved
So I'm going to put the 3D cursor to selected, and then with that we're going to activate 3D cursor as our transformation point origin, and then we can just press S for scale and just get that roughly the same depth as the container. Excellent. Right. Okay, now we can move the origin point to where the hinge should be. So that's going to be on that side to the right. So let's switch on the origins options there. Make sure that we have vertex snapping on. This time I'll turn it on physically there with the button. Don't forget to turn that off again afterwards. And that should be it. So now that should rotate and pivot around that point there. Just to test that, there you go. Switch to side view, press R to rotate. And that works as expected. Okay, let's add some keyframes to the trapdoor and make the animation. So as you can see there, it's the Y-axis rotation values we need to work with. So on frame 1, I'm going to right click on the Y and just add a single keyframe there. And I'm going to Shift D and duplicate that in the timeline and drag it across to the 100th frame. And I'm going to duplicate it again, move that over to 140, and then duplicate it once more and put it onto 220. Of course, these are all the same keyframes at the moment, so nothing's really changing. So we have a couple of seconds or 3 seconds of nothing happening, or 4 seconds. So at this point anyway, at frame 140, we want the door to be open 90 degrees. You can see there it's minus 90. So at that frame, I'm going to right click, replace single keyframe. So now we have an animation happening from 100 to 140. And then it goes back to the starting position. In principle, that's all you need to do. And we'll make it close a lot quicker as well. So let's just see how that looks. Let's try 30 frames there. So it opens like that, stays the same for a little bit. Let's head over to the graph editor. So click the little icon there, select graph editor. If you don't see everything all at once, and you usually don't, just hover your mouse in that space, press the A key to select everything, and the numeric dot key on the numpad. Right, so that's that keyframe where the door starts to open, and I used the bounce interpolation mode. So with that keyframe selected, right click and then select the bounce. And this is what happens next. Brilliant. That's exactly what we want. That works really well. Let's just see that again. Yep, that's good. So I'm happy with that, so leave it like that. And if you can see, the closing animation is not as snappy as I'd like it to be. So we can easily just manipulate these handles now and change the timing of these keyframes. So with that handle selected, I'm going to press G to move and X. G for grab, X for the left and right. Just shift that along so we get a much more aggressive curve. And of course, that means we get a faster animation. So it speeds up very quickly into the next keyframe and then slows down at the end. Just like a car would when you brake. It comes to it decelerates, if I can say that. All right, so that's good. Let's move on. That's good enough. Now you can replicate this and do it for the other side and just copy the shape. In fact, there's many ways you can do it. You can just parent it to an empty as well and just rotate it 180 degrees. And that's probably something I should have done. But I chose to add, foreshadowing now, a mirror modifier. So with that done, I'm going to turn merge off, of course, because we don't want to merge. So I'm wondering what would happen now if we play this. Will it work? Let's have a look. And it does. That's exactly what we want. So at this point, I've pretty much committed to using the mirror modifier at this point anyway. So let's continue with a little bit more modeling and standard stuff. You've seen me do this technique many times. I'm going to select some edges, edge loops, Alt click, Shift Alt click to select multiple. And then with those selected, we can do Control B and add a very subtle bevel. Oh, I like to put the shape to 1. That makes it just puts a couple of edge loops either side of those. And that's enough. And let's add a subdiv modifier. 2 levels is good. That's all we need. And that's looking great. And finally, I'm going to add a loop cut here. And as you'll notice in a minute, I did forget to put one inside the object as well. So, whoopsie. Make sure you do that. Put one on the inside as well. Thanks, Homer. Right. So, let's hop over to the trapdoor. Let's isolate that and turn off the subdiv for a moment. So again, I'm just going to select all of the outer or the leading edges and give them a very small bevel as well. So with those done, we can just press Control B. And the reason I switched back to this is because I want to keep the, the width of the bevels consistent. So I'm going to go back to object mode, turn off the subdiv on this one so I can see the actual bevels. And then tab back into this one. And now we can get a better look and see how wide those bevels should be. And again, eyeball it at this point. It's not important at all. It's a little bit messy there, but I don't really care too much about that right now. This is just for demonstration purposes, so something like that is fine. Let's also add a subdiv to that one and bring the levels up to 2. Let's just move that up in the stack as well. Okay, let's turn wireframe off now. We don't need that anymore. And also turn on the subdivision as well for the main container. So that's all looking great, rather nice. Everything still works, of course. We haven't changed any animation. So what's next? Well, firstly, let's put the 3D cursor back to the world origin. So Shift S and select that from the menu. And you go into top view by pressing 7 on the numpad. And I'm going to add an Ico sphere. And you can add anything you like here. It can be cubes, spheres, UV spheres. Ico spheres have worked better. Well, not better, but they're simple geometry. So, and they look pretty cool when they're rendered. So I thought I'd go with that. So I'm going to scale these down in the options there on the left. That way we don't have to, if you scaled them up now or down, you'd have to apply the scale in object mode. But anyway, let's just make that, put that there. So now I've pressed Shift D to duplicate that. I'm going to move it up at in the same operation. So Shift D, Z, and then click up. And once you've done that, that becomes like a macro. And then you can press Shift R to repeat that a few times. Don't worry if you didn't do that. Just duplicate it and move it up a little bit. Of course it is. Right. I've created a new collection as well and called it Ico Spheres. So now we've got all those in one collection. Let's make another one and bring that down. And we're going to put all the container parts into that collection as well. So now I've duplicated all of those Ico Spheres now and moved them to the right. And switch into the top view. You want to make sure you don't overlap the rim of the container. Just keep it inside the perimeter of the container. Let's select the middle ones again. Go to the top view again with 7 on the numpad. And Shift D to duplicate them and move them on the y-axis this time. And do the same again. Something like that. So now we've got a whole stack of these. And let's do that. Let's start with these and see if these are too many, too few. See what happens. Now this bit, let's select the first icosphere we made, or the object you chose to make. And let's head over to the physics tab and hit rigid body. You want to leave that at active. And this is the important one as well. Change the shape to sphere. That way it doesn't have to work out all the individual faces. And just hit play with the spacebar. And you can see that one just fell through. And to apply the same physics to all of the spheres, don't do it manually one by one. Select all of them and then select the first sphere last. And with that done, you can go to Object, Rigid Body, which I will find in a second. So a bit further down. There it is. You can see Copy from Active. Now I didn't click that, I should have done, but I clicked F3 to search instead. If you just type in Copy, you see there, Rigid Body, Copy from Active. And now all of the spheres will have the same physics properties. So if we hit the spacebar now, as you can see, they all fall down nicely. Let's do the same for this container now. So head over to Physics, add Rigid Body, but this time it has to be passive. We don't want that falling down, and use the mesh as the shape. Otherwise it won't be able to collide with it properly. And the doors, again, passive, and use mesh as the shape. Now, did you forget, or did you spot what I forgot to click? Yeah, thanks Doc. You obviously saw some problems there. So mirror modifier is perhaps causing some issues here with the, or is it actually? It may not be. I don't think it is actually. I think in hindsight, it's the fact that I missed something, and I don't know if you've spotted it already, but we'll get to that in a minute. So I spent a minute or so just having a quick look and seeing what the issue was. So there's our mirror modifier, that's working fine. So in fact, I duplicated that just by doing that earlier operation now. I selected it and duplicated it. My thinking is I would get rid of the mirror modifiers and just have individual left and right objects. So I applied the mirror modifier and then deleted half of the object. So I've got just the one door now, which is the right one there. Okay, so with that done, I'm going to make the other one visible, apply the mirror modifier again. Just making sure I've got the right one, and apply the mirror modifier. Tab into edit mode and delete the faces on the opposite side now. So in face mode, hover your mouse over the faces, press L. And of course, the hinge needs to be on the flip side. So we need to go back into the options and enable origins, and vertex snapping is on. So I'm just going to click the red handle and move that over somewhere like that. Okay. Let's see if this works. So that's all looking good. Oh, I love that meme. It's so funny. And yeah, that one is actually going inside the container, as you can see there. So not what we want. And it's an easy fix actually, because all we need to do is change the values of these keyframes. So as you can see there, that one there, rather than being 90, is now minus 90. So if we click into there, remove the minus, just type 90, and then right click to replace single keyframe. And now that does that, and of course we've got to do the same for that keyframe. Let's just quickly do that. So 90, positive, and replace single keyframe. And that one's fine. So we should be good now. Let's switch over to solid mode. And that's not right, is it? Yay. Almost yay. Right, that looks good. And then the trapdoor's open and everything is stuck. Poor Joey. Right, now at this point, yes, I am foreshadowing, I know. I thought it was because the spheres were slightly off in their scale, so they were just getting stuck. So I then selected all of these, tabbed into edit mode, chose individual origins as the transformation point and then scaled them down just a touch. There you go. And go back to frame 1, hit the spacebar and see if that makes any difference now. Make sure all our transforms are set to their defaults, which they are. They make a big difference, by the way. If these are off, if they're not 111, it won't work as well. Ta-da! Exactly. This is something's wrong here. Doesn't make any sense. Have you spotted the mistake I made? I'd completely forgotten about this option, to be honest. And it's right there. Not that one. There it is. Animated. We've got to tick that little box. Otherwise, the doors are always going to be, the physics are left behind even though the doors are opened. So now, fantastic. That works really well. Okay, so clearly we have too many Ico Spheres, so I'm going to select the top row and delete those. Go back to frame 1, hit the spacebar, and we have a few more spheres popping off outside of the container. A neat little trick here is if you play it, you can just pick the ones that are actually going outside, and then you know where they are in the stack when you go back to frame 1. And reposition them. So if I select 1, 2, and 3, now we can see where they are in the stack. Go back to frame 1. I'll speed this up because at this point, all I'm doing is just tweaking the positions of some of these spheres here and there, because that would obviously change the physics once they fall down. So I thought I'd bring these down a little bit closer together. And we still have a few falling out, so let's delete those 3. And we still have a couple or more falling out. Yeah, and now these 2 are falling out, so let's move these. So just try this technique. Now we've got 1 left. Okay, let's have a look. Yeah, as I say, try this technique, move them around different positions and see if that fixes your problem. Oh, that was close. Okay, that last one. Let's try that. Yes, success. Okay, with that done, let's make the floor. And for this, I used a circle. And I increased the vertices to 64. I made the radius 10 meters. And that's pretty good. And if we tab into edit mode, select all of the vertices in vertex mode, of course, E to extrude, S for scale, and then just bring that in. So E, S, click. And once we've done that, we can then again press Shift R to repeat those 2 steps. Up to a point, you don't want to go all the way, so that's far enough. And then we can scale these in. So what you want to do now is just reposition some of these edge loops, so you can select them and just press S to scale. And I got rid of a few there as well. And I'm just going to lower that until it clears the doors, doesn't hit the doors. So something like that is fine. And then we can tab back into edit mode and create the funnel. So I'm just going to extrude that and bring it down, scale it a touch as it goes down. So you want this basic funnel shape. And then finally, I'm just going to add a bevel to that outer edge there where the funnel is. Now we're going to give that a rigid body, of course, and this time it's going to be passive again, and mesh as the shape. Okay, let's see what happens now if we play this. So the balls fall in, the doors open, and they went through perfectly, but too perfectly. So perhaps a little bit too wide. So let's select these faces and scale them in the X and Y axis only. So S for scale, Shift Z to exclude the Z axis. So you just want minor adjustments here. That's perhaps a little bit too much, but we'll see what happens. Oh, yeah, that's not good. It's now become a scoop. Yeah, the hole is too narrow, clearly, so I have to widen that a little bit more again. So select the floor, tab into edit mode, and once you've done that, you will then find that the spheres do go through, but there's also a slight delay before they fall through, which is what you want. Perfect. So I decided also to add a subdiv modifier to this, and then tab into edit mode, and I selected all of the edge loops that are distributed outwards like that. So select all of these, and I press Ctrl B to bevel with one cut. And I selected all of the middle cuts and just raised them up a little bit. So now we get this kind of ripple look. And what I did here is I selected all of these, I gave all the different rings their different heights. So nearer towards the center, I left them where they were, they're higher. And as it goes outward, they become lower. I thought that looked quite cool. Yeah, and that's exactly what we want now. So that's working really well. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I did forget to add an additional loop cut inside there. So that's when I spotted it later. So I added that and then pressed GG to align it approximately with the one on the outside. And then that way you can add and assign a different material to those faces. And don't forget to do the same on the trapdoors. They're not trapdoors, just doors really. So that's going to be our metallic part. And I'll skip ahead to the materials. I won't go through the whole process of adding nodes and showing you all of that. Here's the HDRI image I used. Link is in the description. And here are all the world shader for starters. And these are all the materials. So I'll just show you these as they are. This video is not about making materials, so nothing really too complicated here. Quite basic stuff. So feel free to pause the video on these and copy those if you like. And those are the color values I used there. Feel free to use whichever colors you like. And lastly, I added, well, I didn't add a camera, the camera was there, but I then went about setting my scene up and a few render properties there, such as color management, max samples, that kind of thing. So I positioned my camera in such a way that I can see the container, of course, on the floor, but we don't want to see the spheres because we want it to loop. So yeah, play around with the position slightly. Now you can see there I've added an empty, which I then called camera look at, and I used a track 2 modifier, so the camera is always looking at that empty. Gives me a little bit more control. Now it's a case of just me testing to see if everything plays seamlessly. One thing I'd forgotten at this point was to make the floor metallic, but the material is correct. I just didn't have it in this part of the video until right at the very end. I also added a touch of depth of field and created a depth of field target, which, as you can see, I just placed there somewhere roughly inside the container. And that's everything that I did basically. At this point I was really happy with the results, so I rendered that out, and that's the animation you can see playing here. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. If you enjoy my content, a like and subscribe would be appreciated. I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks. Bye.